What if I told you that one of the greatest RPG franchises of all time started off as a medieval fighting game, then almost bankrupted the studio, before completely redefining open-world gaming forever? Yeah, that actually happened. From broken beginnings to record-shattering success, this is the wild journey of the Elder Scrolls. From the forgotten days of Arena to the legacy of Skyrim and beyond. And trust me, the road to get there is full of chaos, creativity, and some seriously bold decisions. So buckle up, because we're diving into the full history of a franchise that changed everything. Back in the mid-'80s, before Bethesda was even a name in gaming, Christopher Weaver was deep into tech, working with broadcast systems, predicting how satellites and broadband would reshape television. The guy was sharp, ahead of the curve, and not afraid to chase big ideas. After a few ventures that didn't quite hit, he doubled down in 1986 and threw $100,000 of his own cash into launching Bethesda Softworks right out of his living room. No investors, no safety net, just passion and a risky bet on a game called Gridiron. It launched on Atari and Commodore 64, and surprisingly, it sold out in its first week. Bethesda kept busy through the late 80s and early 90s, mostly building sports titles with Electronic Arts and experimenting with licensed games like the Terminator on MS-DOS. But by 1991, they were itching to try something different. The original plan was a first-person medieval fighting game where players controlled gladiators in brutal arena duels. No quests, no dragons, just raw combat. But as development went on, something shifted. The devs realized that the game engine they'd used for titles like Future Shock had serious potential. They could render cities, weather, night and day cycles, stuff way beyond just a combat ring. So, the team scrapped the original pitch and went full throttle into building a massive open-world RPG instead. Under the leadership of names like Ted Peterson, Julian LeFay, and Vijay Lakshman, plus a young Todd Howard testing builds behind the scenes, they set their sights on Tamriel. A fantasy continent so big and complex, it made most RPGs of the time look like basic dungeons in comparison. And while they were figuring out how to pull this off, some folks in the RPG scene straight up laughed at them. Developers from games like Wizardry and Crusaders of the Dark Savant didn't think Bethesda had the experience or tech to deliver on that kind of vision. But they pushed forward anyway, fueled by pure ambition and a little bit of spite. When Arena dropped in 1994, it didn't just launch a new RPG, it cracked open the door to something way bigger. Most games back then were still thinking in levels and tight corridors. But Arena showed up with randomly generated maps, open-world exploration, and this sense that the world of Tamriel wasn't just background, it was alive. Players were chasing down the Chaos Staff to stop a powerful sorcerer named Jagar Tharn, but the real magic wasn't in the story, it was in the freedom. The combat was raw and physical, built around real-time mouse swipes that mimicked weapon swings. It felt clunky at times, but for 1994, it was ambitious, especially when mixed with the surprisingly deep magic system. Players could cast everything from basic fireballs to complex utility spells, and even create custom spells through a system that let you tweak range, damage, and effects. But what really stood out was the sense of scale. The game threw you into massive, procedurally generated cities and dungeons, with no hand-holding whatsoever. There wasn't even an automatic map. If you didn't draw out the dungeon layouts yourself or memorize the twists and turns, it was easy to get lost for hours. Sure, it needed a beefy PC to run properly, but that didn't stop players from diving in and getting hooked. After Arena gained a solid fan base, Bethesda decided to level up, big time. Their next game, Daggerfall, was so ambitious it nearly wrecked the studio. They were building an entirely new engine, juggling deadlines, and running on a shoestring budget. It was chaos behind the scenes, with devs pulling long hours and scrambling to get the tech to actually work. But in the end, they pulled it off. Daggerfall landed in 1996, and to this day, it still holds the crown for the largest map ever in a video game. We're talking about over 161,000 square kilometers, more than 15,000 towns, dungeons, and locations. It was absolutely massive. The story revolved around ancient powers, mysterious relics, and warring factions. But again, the heart of the experience was the sheer scale and freedom. The game featured dozens of joinable factions, from knightly orders and religious cults to thieves' guilds and mages' circles, each with their own quests, rivalries, and internal politics. Your reputation with each group could change dynamically, not just from missions but from your behavior out in the world. You could even arrange political marriages, get titles of nobility, and climb social ladders in different regions. All of that was layered on top of a branching narrative with multiple endings, depending on the alliances you made. But Daggerfall was also infamous for its bugs, some hilarious, others game-breaking. Players discovered that certain levitation spells could send you flying through ceilings, and collision detection was so spotty you could accidentally walk straight through walls or into voids. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes barely held together. But it introduced systems that would become staples in the series: deep character creation, branching quests, dynamic magic. And while there were no official expansions, the modding community stepped up big. Even decades later, fans are still patching, tweaking, and expanding Daggerfall, keeping it alive long past its time. It was proof that a truly open, player-driven world could exist, even if the hardware had to fight to keep up. After the chaos that was Daggerfall, Bethesda needed to catch its breath. So instead of going bigger, they went smaller. Or at least, that was the plan. They shifted gears to a side project called Battlespire. Originally meant to be just a dungeon add-on for Daggerfall, it evolved into its own standalone experience. Less open world, more focused. Battlespire was all about tight corridors, spell-slinging combat, and a darker, more personal storyline. You played a young recruit stuck inside a twisted dimension, trying to escape while everything around you tried to kill you. It dropped in late 1997 for MS-DOS, and even supported multiplayer, both co-op and versus. It didn't blow up commercially, but it showed that the Elder Scrolls could work in a more action-heavy format too. Then came Redguard in 1998, a completely different kind of experiment. Instead of creating another massive RPG, Bethesda leaned into cinematic storytelling and third-person action. They ditched character creation entirely and gave players a fixed hero, more in line with games like Tomb Raider or Prince of Persia. You played as Cyrus, a sword-wielding rogue on a mission in the coastal city of Stros Makai. The game pushed hard for a cinematic feel, with voiced characters, something still rare back then, and sweeping camera angles that made cutscenes feel more like scenes from a movie than a traditional RPG. It ditched the usual first-person perspective for a third-person view that showed off detailed environments and smooth character animations, thanks to a custom engine built specifically for this more scripted, action-focused style. But all that ambition came at a cost. The fixed protagonist, limited customization, and narrower scope didn't sit well with longtime fans who loved the freedom of Arena and Daggerfall. The game didn't sell well, and the team at Bethesda took that hit seriously. It became a wake-up call that reminded them what made their games special in the first place. As mobile devices started becoming more capable in the early 2000s, Bethesda tried something new again. Between 2002 and 2004, they released the Travel series, Stormhold, Dawnstar, and Shadowkey. These were simplified first-person RPGs designed for flip phones and PDAs. Yeah, full-blown Elder Scrolls adventures on little tiny screens. Each title had its own story, but they all kept the franchise's core identity: exploration, dungeon crawling, and building your character your way. By 2001, with all these side projects behind them, Bethesda finally created a dedicated division just for their RPGs, Bethesda Game Studios. That same year, they also began work on their most ambitious title yet. They switched to the Gamebryo engine and set out to build a true next-gen fantasy world in full 3D. The result would be Morrowind. Development on Morrowind kicked off in 1999, and by the time it hit E3 in 2001, it already looked like a game that could change the rules. 3 years of work went into building a world that felt alive, strange, and deeply immersive. When it finally launched in May 2002 for Xbox and Windows, Morrowind didn't just meet expectations. It completely redefined what an open-world RPG could be. Set on the volcanic island of Vardenfell, players were dropped into a land full of ancient ruins, political tension, and alien landscapes. The world wasn't just big, it was bizarre. Giant mushroom trees, insect-shaped cities, ash-covered wastelands, and ancient Daedric ruins created a world that felt completely alien. The Daedra themselves, otherworldly beings that blurred the lines between gods and demons, added this deep, unsettling mysticism that made the game feel ancient and sacred all at once. But what made Morrowind hit so hard was how much control it gave you. You weren't locked into classes or paths. You could build your own spells, tweak your weapons, and carve your own way through the world. Whether you were joining guilds, taking on the prophecy of the Nerevarine, or just wandering off to explore a dungeon no one told you about, it all felt personal. The game dropped 2 major expansions too, Tribunal in 2002, which added a whole new city and political drama, and Blood Moon in 2003, which threw you into the icy chaos of Solstheim, complete with werewolves and new factions to align with. Morrowind was a massive hit with the modding community as well. Fans created bug fixes, performance upgrades, and entirely new content, keeping the game alive long after its original run. It sold nearly 1 million copies by 2006, and it was the title that proved Bethesda could stand toe-to-toe with the biggest names in gaming. Then came Oblivion in 2006, and with it, a whole new level of polish. Using an updated version of the Gamebryo engine, Oblivion introduced a more dynamic world with smarter NPCs, a better quest system, and stunning lighting effects for the time. One of the biggest technical leaps in Oblivion was the introduction of the Radiant AI system. Instead of scripting every NPC's behavior line by line, Bethesda gave them schedules and needs, so they'd eat, sleep, go to work, even steal food if they couldn't afford it. On paper, it was revolutionary, but it didn't always work perfectly. Sometimes NPCs would break into houses just to grab a loaf of bread, but it created some hilarious, unscripted moments that gave the game a pulse. And speaking of unscripted moments, Oblivion also made headlines for a different reason. When Bethesda released the infamous Horse Armor DLC for a few bucks, fans were outraged. Paying real money for cosmetic armor for your mount felt like a joke, and it quickly became one, sparking memes and endless internet mockery. But in hindsight, it was one of the first glimpses of how the industry would move toward paid cosmetic content. The story took players across the Imperial Province as portals to a demonic dimension called Oblivion began tearing the world apart. It was epic, cinematic, and packed with content. The game also received 2 major expansions, Knights of the Nine, which focused on divine quests and ancient relics, and Shivering Isles, a wild dive into the mind-bending realm of Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. Oblivion sold over 9.5 million copies and swept award shows, grabbing multiple Game of the Year titles. It marked a turning point not just for the series, but for Western RPGs as a whole. The systems, mechanics, and structure introduced here would become the foundation for everything that came next. And in 2025, out of nowhere, Bethesda dropped a remaster of Oblivion for next-gen consoles and PC. No massive marketing push, no endless teasers, just boom, here it is. Built using Unreal Engine 5, the update brought stunning new visuals, real-time lighting, better lip sync, smoother menus, and a full interface overhaul. It didn't just look better, it played better. And despite the stealth launch, over 150,000 players jumped in on day one. That's the kind of power this series still holds, even when competing against big-budget RPGs that had been hyped for years. But if there's one title that truly made the Elder Scrolls a global phenomenon, it's Skyrim. Revealed in 2009 and finally launching on November 11, 2011, Skyrim hit PC, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360 like a storm. It was the RPG that made everyone stop what they were doing and dive into Tamriel. Powered by the Creation Engine, an upgraded take on Gamebryo, Skyrim introduced dragons that flew and fought in real time, a dynamic world that reacted to your actions, and the iconic shout system, where your voice became a weapon rooted in Nordic lore. The game's impact was huge. It got 3 major DLCs. Dawnguard added vampire hunters and new quests. Hearthfire let you build and customize your own home. And Dragonborn took players back to Solstheim with fresh enemies and lore tied to Morrowind. Beyond official content, the modding scene exploded. Fans created everything from graphics overhauls to entirely new storylines, turning Skyrim into a living, breathing platform that evolved for over a decade. Skyrim became such a cultural phenomenon that Bethesda basically turned it into a running joke, and then made that joke real. Over the years, the game was re-released on almost every platform imaginable. It hit Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, then came back on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and even got a special edition for next-gen consoles. There was a VR version, a remaster, and yes, even a parody release for Amazon Alexa. In that skit, players could shout voice commands to navigate dungeons by voice alone. The absurdity became part of the marketing, and fans embraced it. The meme hit its peak when people joked about playing Skyrim on a smart fridge, and to some extent, modders actually made that happen. At one point, Todd Howard even addressed the constant re-releases with a smirk, saying, "If you want us to stop releasing it, stop buying it." It was a tongue-in-cheek admission that the demand just wouldn't die, and neither would the game. Skyrim racked up over 200 Game of the Year awards and even pulled off the impossible by earning a perfect 40 out of 40 from Famitsu, a Japanese magazine notoriously tough on Western games. And as of June 2023, Todd Howard confirmed that the game had sold over 60 million copies. But the story of the Elder Scrolls is far from over. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the video, do me a quick favor and check out Xmod. It's a free tool that lets you skip the grind and the boring parts in over 5,000 single-player games. Need more gold? Can't beat that one boss? With just one click, you've got cheats, trainers, mods, and other features ready to go. No setup, no headaches. It's 100% safe with your Steam account, but yes, single-player only. And just downloading once through my link gives a small commission to the channel and helps us keep making more content for you. It takes less than 15 seconds, I promise. But you have no idea how much it helps us out. So, go ahead and give it a try, it's free. Links in the description and pinned comment. In April 2014, Bethesda teamed up with ZeniMax Online Studios to launch something completely new for the series, an MMO called The Elder Scrolls Online. Instead of a single-player journey, players now had the chance to explore the world of Tamriel alongside thousands of others in real time. It took nearly 6 years of development to get it right, focusing on real-time combat, flexible character builds, and a leveling system that still felt like classic Elder Scrolls. At first, it only launched on Windows and Mac, but eventually made its way to consoles like PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Over the years, ESO dropped some seriously impressive expansions that didn't just add content. They fleshed out entire regions of Tamriel with deep lore and unique mechanics. The Morrowind chapter in 2017 brought players back to the iconic island of Vardenfell, decades before the events of the third game, with a storyline centered on the god Vivek and a new class, the Warden. Then came Somerset, opening up the High Elf homeland for the first time in franchise history, with an elegant aesthetic and a focus on ancient magical orders like the Sigil. Later, Elsewhere took players into the sun-drenched deserts and lush jungles of the Khajiit, complete with dragon attacks and a necromancer class that shook up the meta. And honestly, ESO came a long way from its rough launch. The combat tightened up, the writing matured, and performance across platforms drastically improved. By 2024, Bethesda revealed that the game had generated over $2 billion in revenue, an absolute monster hit that proved Elder Scrolls could dominate outside of the single-player space too. But this game wasn't the only spin-off keeping the franchise alive. In 2017, The Elder Scrolls Legends brought the universe into the digital card game world. It kicked off under Direwolf Digital and later moved to Sparky Pants Studios. The game offered a solid mix of PvP, single-player campaigns, and regular expansions that used cards to tell new stories, highlight classic characters, and even dive deeper into the lore. It eventually shut down in early 2025, but for a while, it carved out its own niche in the Elder Scrolls legacy. Then in 2020, Bethesda released the Elder Scrolls Blades. Built using a streamlined version of the Creation Engine, it was a mobile-first experience that later arrived on the Nintendo Switch. It wasn't an open-world adventure like the mainline games. Instead, it focused on dungeon crawling, base building, and time-based missions you could knock out in short bursts. But the game caught a lot of flack early on for its aggressive microtransactions, especially the way players had to wait real-time hours to unlock loot chests, unless they paid to speed things up. That system, mixed with a lot of repetitive dungeon layouts and a grind-heavy progression, made it feel more like a mobile money trap than a full Elder Scrolls experience. But even with all that, the core DNA of the series was still in there. Blades featured first-person melee and magic combat, rich visual design for a mobile title, and that same loop of looting, upgrading, and customizing your character. It even had a town-building element where you could slowly rebuild your hometown after it was destroyed. And most recently, in September 2024, came the Elder Scrolls Castles. Think of it like Fallout Shelter, but set in the Elder Scrolls universe. You manage your own castle, build out rooms, handle resources, and send your heroes off on daily quests. It's lighter, more casual, but still rooted in the world fans know and love. At E3 2018, Bethesda dropped a teaser that lit the internet on fire. A short, cryptic glimpse of the Elder Scrolls 6. No gameplay, no details, just a name and a sweeping shot of mountains. But that was enough. Fans had been waiting since Skyrim for a proper new chapter, and that tiny clip sparked years of speculation. Fast forward to March 25th, 2024, and on the series' 30th anniversary, Bethesda confirmed what everyone hoped. Development is still alive, and early builds of the game are finally being tested internally. No release date yet. But that hasn't stopped the hype from climbing to insane levels. And of course, ever since that teaser trailer showed off those rugged mountains and sweeping coastlines, fans have been dissecting every frame to figure out where the Elder Scrolls 6 might take place. The two frontrunners, Hammerfell and High Rock. Hammerfell is the home of the Red Guards, a harsh, sun-scorched land full of deserts, ancient ruins, and warrior culture. It's a place shaped by conflict, both politically and environmentally, and its sprawling landscapes could make for some breathtaking open-world exploration. On the other hand, High Rock is known for its dense forests, Gothic architecture, and a tangled web of rival kingdoms and magical orders. If Bethesda leans into High Rock, the game could dive deep into court intrigue, arcane secrets, and fractured alliances. There's also a chance the game could blend both regions, especially since they border each other. Some fans even point to subtle in-game maps, lore books, and developer comments hinting at this dual setting. But before we let the hype carry us too far, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the Microsoft acquisition. Because as exciting as the future of the Elder Scrolls looks, there's a lot riding on who's actually steering the ship now. When Microsoft bought ZeniMax and Bethesda back in 2021, it felt like a seismic shift. One that could either take the Elder Scrolls to the next level or quietly derail everything fans have been waiting for. On paper, the deal brought a ton of perks: bigger budgets, longer development cycles, and access to massive tech resources. That should, in theory, allow Bethesda to create the most polished and expansive entry in the series yet. But not everyone sees it as good news. Microsoft's track record with acquired studios has been shaky at best. Some teams have thrived, but others have seen creative vision watered down, output slowed, or worse, shut down completely. There's a real fear among longtime fans that the corporate structure could dilute the magic that made Elder Scrolls special in the first place. And with Elder Scrolls 6 likely being an Xbox and PC exclusive, it's already drawing criticism from a community used to open access. For over 3 decades, the Elder Scrolls has pushed the boundaries of what open-world RPGs can be. Daggerfall gave us scale no one thought was possible. Morrowind brought alien landscapes and unmatched freedom. Oblivion made everything cinematic. And Skyrim? It became a cultural juggernaut. Each entry raised the bar, not just for Bethesda, but for the entire genre. Even the side projects played a part. Whether it was the casual charm of castles, the focused mobile quests of Blades, or the strategic gameplay of Legends, they helped keep Tamriel relevant on every platform. And of course, you can't talk about Elder Scrolls without mentioning the modding community. From full-on game rebuilds like Tamriel Rebuilt and Enderal, to projects like OpenMW that re-engineer the game engines themselves, fans have constantly pushed the series further than anyone thought possible. With the Elder Scrolls Online anchoring the multiplayer side and spin-offs expanding the universe into new genres, the franchise has proven it can evolve without losing its soul. Now, with next-gen hardware in play and millions of players hungry for something new, The Elder Scrolls 6 isn't just another sequel. It's the next chapter in one of gaming's greatest legacies. And when it finally arrives, it's going to be massive, I hope. And hey, if you liked the video, make sure to check out Xmod using the link below. It takes less than a minute, seriously. And just by downloading already helps the channel with a small commission and keeps this whole thing running. And while you're at it, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for hanging out.